When a super empath finally reaches their breaking point with an avoidance coldness and emotional unavailability, their transformation is nothing short of spectacular and terrifying for the avoidant, who has grown accustomed to unlimited emotional labor without reciprocation. The super empath doesn't simply leave or express anger. They undergo a complete metamorphosis that strips away every advantage the avoidant has enjoyed in the relationship dynamic. The super empath's awakening represents the moment when their extraordinary capacity for love, understanding, and emotional support transforms from a gift freely given to a strategic weapon wielded with surgical precision. This transformation occurs when they finally recognize that their endless compassion has been enabling dysfunction rather than healing it, that their patience has been mistaken for weakness, and that their emotional availability has been taken for granted rather than treasured. The process begins with the super empath's recognition that they have been operating in a fundamentally unbalanced dynamic where their emotional intelligence, intuitive abilities, and capacity for love have been exploited by someone incapable of reciprocating at the same level. They realize they've been pouring water into a bucket with holes, giving endlessly to someone who couldn't appreciate the rarity and value of what they were receiving. This awakening is often triggered by a moment of shocking clarity where the super empath sees the relationship through objective eyes rather than through the lens of hope and potential. They might witness the avoidant's casual cruelty, recognize a pattern of manipulation they've been excusing, or simply reach emotional exhaustion from constantly accommodating someone else's limitations while receiving minimal care in return. The transformation that follows is systematic and devastating in its precision. The super empath doesn't react emotionally or try to hurt the avoidant through dramatic gestures or confrontations. Instead, they begin strategically withdrawing the very qualities that made them invaluable to the avoidant: their emotional support, intuitive understanding, unconditional acceptance, and ability to create safety and comfort in the relationship. This withdrawal is particularly powerful because it's enacted by someone who understands exactly what the avoidant needs and has been providing it consistently. The super empath knows precisely which emotional supports to remove, which boundaries to enforce, and which comforts to eliminate to create maximum impact while maintaining their own dignity and integrity. The avoidant, who has become psychologically dependent on the super empath's emotional labor and regulation, suddenly finds themselves facing a void where unlimited understanding and support once existed. They're forced to confront their own emotional limitations without the buffer of someone else's strength and wisdom to rely upon. This strategic withdrawal represents the super empath's recognition of their own power and worth. They understand that they've been offering extraordinary value that deserves recognition and reciprocation. When that reciprocation isn't forthcoming, they choose to invest their remarkable capabilities elsewhere rather than continuing to enable someone's emotional dysfunction. The silent nature of this revenge makes it particularly effective because it removes the avoidant's ability to position themselves as the victim of unreasonable demands or emotional outbursts. The super empath simply stops providing services they never owed, stops accommodating limitations they shouldn't have been expected to manage, and stops accepting treatment that falls far below their worth and standards, the withdrawal of emotional labor when the well runs dry. The first and most devastating aspect of the super empath's silent revenge is the complete withdrawal of the emotional labor that has been sustaining the avoidant's ability to function in the relationship without genuine emotional investment. This withdrawal is surgical in its precision, targeting exactly the support systems the avoidant has come to depend on while taking them completely for granted. Super empaths typically provide extraordinary levels of emotional labor in their relationships. They interpret unclear communication, manage emotional conflicts, process relationship issues, provide therapeutic support during difficult times, and create emotional safety and stability that allows their partners to avoid developing these skills themselves. The avoidant becomes addicted to this emotional regulation and support without recognizing its value or the effort required to provide it. When the super empath withdraws this labor, the avoidant suddenly finds themselves facing emotional challenges they've never had to navigate independently. They must interpret social situations without someone else's intuitive guidance, manage their own emotional reactions without external regulation, and handle relationship conflicts without someone else doing the heavy lifting of processing and resolution. The withdrawal is particularly devastating because it's comprehensive and sustained. The super empath doesn't just reduce their emotional labor, they eliminate it entirely, forcing the avoidant to confront their own emotional immaturity and lack of relationship skills. This isn't temporary punishment, but permanent recognition that their emotional energy is precious and shouldn't be wasted on someone who can't appreciate or reciprocate it. The super empath stops explaining their feelings when the avoidant fails to understand emotional cues. They stop processing the avoidant's behavior patterns and providing insights about underlying motivations. They stop managing the avoidant's relationships with others by providing social intelligence and emotional guidance. They stop creating emotional safety during conflicts by doing all the work of understanding and resolution. This withdrawal forces the avoidant to develop emotional skills they've never needed because the super empath has been providing them as a service. They must learn to read emotional situations, interpret communication, manage their own reactions, and navigate relationship challenges without the invisible support system that has been carrying them through every interpersonal interaction. The timing of this withdrawal is often when the avoidant needs emotional support most. During stressful periods, conflicts, or challenges where they would normally rely on the super empath's wisdom and strength. Finding this support suddenly unavailable creates panic and disorientation as they realize how dependent they've become on someone else's emotional intelligence and labor. The super empath's withdrawal teaches the avoidant about the true cost of emotional labor and the value of what they've been receiving without acknowledgement or appreciation. They begin to understand that emotional intelligence and support aren't freely available resources, but valuable capabilities that require effort, energy, and skill to provide consistently. This lesson about emotional labor often extends beyond the relationship to the avoidant's recognition of how they've been taking emotional support for granted in other relationships as well. They may realize that family members, friends, and colleagues have been providing emotional labor they've been unconsciously exploiting without reciprocation or appreciation. The withdrawal of emotional labor creates space for the super empath to redirect this energy toward people and activities that can provide appropriate reciprocation and appreciation. They invest their remarkable emotional intelligence in relationships and pursuits that value and nurture their gifts rather than exploiting them without acknowledgement. The mirror effect, reflecting their energy with perfect precision. The second element of the super empath's silent revenge involves becoming a perfect mirror of the avoidance energy, reflecting back exactly the level of emotional investment, communication, and care that they receive, rather than continuing to provide disproportionately more than what's being offered. This mirroring effect is devastating because it shows the avoidant exactly what they've been giving in the relationship. Throughout the relationship, the super empath has likely been operating at a much higher level of emotional investment than the avoidant, providing more attention, care, communication, and effort while making excuses for the disparity as personality differences or attachment style variations. This imbalance allowed the avoidant to maintain minimal investment while receiving maximum emotional returns. When the super empath begins mirroring the avoidant's energy exactly, it creates a shocking contrast that reveals the poverty of what the avoidant has been contributing to the relationship. If the avoidant takes 3 days to respond to messages, the super empath takes 3 days. If the avoidant provides minimal emotional support during challenges, the super empath provides minimal support in return. This mirroring is particularly powerful because it's not petty or vindictive. It's simply equitable. The super empath is finally operating at the same level of investment as their partner, rather than compensating for their partner's emotional limitations through overgiving. The avoidant can't complain about receiving exactly what they've been providing without acknowledging their own inadequacy. The precision of this mirroring often shocks the avoidant into recognizing how little they've been contributing to the relationship. They experience firsthand what it feels like to receive the same level of attention, support, and investment they've been providing, and they quickly realize it's insufficient for their own needs and satisfaction. The mirroring effect extends to all areas of interaction: communication frequency and depth, emotional availability during difficult times, effort invested in shared activities and future planning, physical affection and intimacy, and support during personal challenges and achievements. The super empath matches every aspect of the avoidance investment level exactly. This strategy is particularly effective because it removes the super empath's role as the relationship's emotional engine while forcing the avoidant to experience what minimal investment actually feels like from the receiving end. They can no longer coast on their partner's overgiving while providing minimal reciprocal effort. The mirroring also eliminates the avoidant's ability to take the high ground in conflicts about relationship investment. They can't accuse their partner of being demanding or needy when they're receiving exactly the same level of care and attention they've been providing. The equity is undeniable and forces honest examination of their contribution. This perfect reflection often triggers anxiety and avoidance because they realize they've become accustomed to receiving much more than they give. The relationship no longer feels comfortable or satisfying when they are only getting back what they put in, revealing their unconscious dependence on their partner's emotional overgiving. The mirroring effect serves as powerful education about reciprocity and fairness in relationships. It teaches the avoidant what equitable investment looks like and demonstrates that healthy relationships require similar levels of effort and care from both partners, rather than one person carrying the emotional burden. The strength in silence, when words become unnecessary. The third aspect of the super empath's revenge is their transition from extensive communication and explanation to profound strategic silence that speaks volumes about their transformation and the futility of continued attempts to reach someone who remains emotionally unavailable. This silence is not punishment, but recognition that words have failed to create understanding or change. Super empaths typically excel at communication and often over-explain their feelings, needs, and perspectives in attempts to help their partners understand and connect with them. They may have spent countless hours trying to explain how the avoidance behavior affects them, what they need to feel secure in the relationship, and how partnership could work better for both people. When the super empath chooses silence, it represents their recognition that communication requires a willing recipient, that understanding requires genuine interest in another person's experience, and that explanation is worthless when offered to someone who isn't motivated to comprehend or change their behavior patterns. This silence is particularly powerful because it comes from someone whose words previously carried significant weight and insight. The avoidant has likely become accustomed to the super empath's wisdom, emotional intelligence, and ability to articulate complex feelings and relationship dynamics. The absence of this guidance creates a void the avoidant feels acutely. The silence extends to all forms of emotional processing and relationship discussion. The super empath stops explaining why they're hurt, stops trying to help the avoidant understand their impact on others, stops providing insights about relationship dynamics, and stops offering guidance about emotional growth and healing. This withdrawal of communication forces the avoidant to sit with their own confusion and lack of emotional understanding without external help in processing their experiences. They must navigate relationship challenges without the super empath's interpretive abilities and emotional intelligence to guide them through complex interpersonal situations. The silence also eliminates the avoidant's opportunity to manage the relationship through explanations, justifications, or promises of future change. They can no longer rely on their ability to talk their way out of consequences or use communication to maintain connection while avoiding genuine behavioral change. The power of this silence lies in its finality and dignity. The super empath isn't withholding communication as punishment, but has simply reached the conclusion that further explanation is pointless when directed towards someone who has demonstrated inability or unwillingness to understand and respond appropriately. This silence often triggers intense anxiety in avoidance because they realize they've lost access to someone whose words provided clarity, insight, and emotional guidance they couldn't generate independently. They may frantically try to restart communication, only to discover that the super empath has moved beyond the need to explain themselves to someone who proved incapable of understanding. The silence serves as the super empath's declaration of independence from the need to be understood by someone who lacks the emotional intelligence or motivation to truly comprehend their experience. It represents their recognition that their energy is better invested in relationships where communication creates mutual understanding rather than one-sided explanation. The elevation strategy, rising above while they sink below. The fourth element of the super empath's silent revenge involves a dramatic elevation of their own life, standards, and connections, while the avoidant remains stuck in the same patterns that drove the super empath away. This elevation isn't motivated by spite, but by recognition of their own worth and the abundance of opportunities available when they stop limiting themselves to accommodate someone else's emotional poverty. The super empath's elevation process involves comprehensive improvement across all areas of their life: personal development, professional advancement, social connections, physical health, creative pursuits, and spiritual growth. They channel the enormous energy they previously invested in trying to heal and understand the avoidant into building an extraordinary life that demonstrates their true potential when not constrained by someone else's limitations. This elevation is particularly striking because super empaths typically have vast potential that may have been suppressed or misdirected while focused on their partner's emotional needs and relationship challenges. When they redirect this energy toward their own growth, the transformation is often remarkable and rapid, showcasing capabilities the avoidant never fully recognized or appreciated. The professional advancement component might involve pursuing career opportunities that were previously declined to accommodate the relationship, developing skills that were neglected while providing emotional support to their partner, or launching creative projects that were postponed while managing someone else's emotional chaos and instability. The social elevation involves forming connections with people who can appreciate and reciprocate the super empath's emotional intelligence, depth, and capacity for meaningful relationship. They discover that their remarkable qualities are highly valued by emotionally mature individuals who can provide the mutual understanding and support they've been craving. The personal development aspect includes healing from the relationship trauma, developing stronger boundaries, and building even greater emotional intelligence and self-awareness. The super empath emerges from the relationship wiser, stronger, and more selective about who deserves access to their extraordinary capabilities. The elevation strategy is particularly devastating to avoidants because it demonstrates what the super empath is capable of achieving when not constrained by someone else's emotional limitations. The avoidant witnesses firsthand what they prevented through their coldness and unavailability, the full flowering of someone extraordinary who they had access to but couldn't appreciate. This dramatic improvement in the super empath's life circumstances often triggers intense regret in avoidance, as they realize they had front row seats to watch someone remarkable, but were too emotionally limited to recognize or nurture their partner's potential. They see what they could have been part of building together if they had been capable of genuine partnership. The elevation also serves as powerful evidence that the super empath's previous struggles weren't due to personal inadequacy, but to the toxic dynamic created by trying to love someone who couldn't reciprocate appropriately. The transformation proves that they were capable of extraordinary things all along, but were being held back by the relationship's emotional constraints. The timing of this elevation often coincides with the avoidant's attempts to reconnect, creating a painful contrast between the super empath's growth and the avoidant's stagnation. The avoidant may reach out hoping to find their former partner in the same emotional state they left them in, only to discover someone who has evolved far beyond their ability to reach or relate to. The replacement strategy, finding worthy recipients of their gifts. The fifth, and perhaps most devastating aspect of the super empath's silent revenge, is their ability to find and connect with people who can truly appreciate and reciprocate their extraordinary emotional gifts, demonstrating to the avoidant what they lost by failing to value what was freely offered to them. This replacement isn't about finding someone better, but about finding someone capable. Super empaths possess rare qualities that include deep emotional intelligence, intuitive understanding of others, exceptional capacity for love and support, ability to create emotional safety and healing environments, and sophisticated communication skills that facilitate genuine intimacy and connection. These qualities are highly valued by emotionally mature individuals who can recognize and reciprocate such gifts. When the super empath redirects these qualities toward people who can appreciate them, the contrast with the avoidance response becomes stark and undeniable. They find friends who treasure their wisdom and insight, colleagues who value their emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills, and potentially romantic partners who can match their depth and emotional availability. The replacement process often happens organically as the super empath's elevated energy and healed state naturally attracts people who operate at similar levels of emotional maturity and relational capability. They discover that their qualities, which seemed overwhelming or unnecessary to the avoidant, are exactly what emotionally healthy people have been seeking. This natural attraction to worthy recipients demonstrates that the problem was never the super empath's intensity, emotional needs, or relationship expectations. The problem was offering these gifts to someone who lacked the emotional capacity to receive and reciprocate them appropriately. With the right people, the super empath's qualities create profound connection rather than fear and withdrawal. The avoidant often witnesses this replacement through social media, mutual friends, or direct observation, seeing their former partner thriving in relationships and connections that provide the mutual understanding and appreciation that was missing from their dynamic. This observation forces them to confront that the super empath wasn't the problem. Their inability to appreciate and reciprocate was. The replacement strategy is particularly painful for avoidance because it proves that the super empath's needs and expectations weren't unreasonable or excessive. Other people eagerly provide the emotional availability, consistency, and depth that the avoidant found overwhelming or unnecessary. This recognition eliminates their ability to blame relationship problems on their partner's demands. The speed and ease with which super empaths often find worthy recipients of their gifts can be shocking to avoidants who assumed their former partner would struggle to find anyone else who could tolerate their emotional intensity or depth. Instead, they discover that emotionally mature people actively seek and value these qualities. The contrast between how the super empath is treated by new connections versus how they were treated by the avoidant often serves as painful education about the avoidant's inadequacy as a partner. They see their former partner being celebrated, appreciated, and cherished for qualities they took for granted or found burdensome. This replacement also demonstrates the super empath's worth and desirability to others, forcing the avoidant to reconsider their assessment of their former partner's value. They may have unconsciously believed they were doing their partner a favor by maintaining any connection at all, only to discover that many people would treasure the opportunity to love and be loved by someone so remarkable. The final lesson: the true cost of emotional coldness. The cumulative effect of the super empath's silent revenge creates a comprehensive education for the avoidant about the true cost of their emotional coldness and unavailability. This lesson encompasses not just what they lost in terms of their specific relationship, but what their defensive patterns cost them in terms of life satisfaction, personal growth, and meaningful connection. The lesson about consequences reveals that emotional coldness doesn't protect them from pain. It guarantees they'll experience the pain of isolation, regret, and missed opportunities for love and growth. Their defensive strategies haven't made them safer. They've made them lonelier and cut them off from the very experiences that could heal their attachment wounds. The education about reciprocity shows them that healthy relationships require mutual emotional investment, and that their pattern of minimal giving while expecting maximum receiving is unsustainable with emotionally mature partners. They learn that love isn't just about being cared for, but about caring for others in ways that create mutual nourishment and growth. The replacement lesson demonstrates that their emotional limitations aren't universal relationship challenges, but specific inadequacies that prevent them from connecting with emotionally mature people. They see that others can provide what they couldn't or wouldn't, eliminating their ability to blame relationship failures on incompatibility rather than their own emotional unavailability. The elevation lesson shows them what they prevented through their coldness: the opportunity to be part of something extraordinary, to witness and support their partner's full potential, and to grow alongside someone remarkable who could have enhanced their own life immeasurably if they had been capable of genuine appreciation and partnership. The withdrawal lesson teaches them about the value of emotional labor and support they've been taking for granted. They learn that emotional intelligence, understanding, and care aren't freely available resources, but valuable gifts that require effort and skill to provide consistently and effectively. These combined lessons often create a complete reframing of the avoidant's understanding of relationships, love, and their own role in their repeated relationship failures. They may finally recognize that their pattern of emotional coldness has been the common factor in their disappointments rather than bad luck or incompatible partners. However, learning these lessons doesn't guarantee that the avoidant will develop the emotional skills necessary to apply this knowledge in future relationships. Knowledge and behavioral change are different processes, and many avoidants struggle to translate their new understanding into sustained different choices and behaviors. The super empath's silent revenge serves its purpose regardless of whether it motivates the avoidant's growth. Its primary function is to protect and elevate the super empath while demonstrating their worth and power. Whether the avoidant learns from this experience is secondary to the super empath's reclamation of their energy, standards, and life direction. The silence of this revenge is its greatest strength. It requires no explanation, creates no drama, and leaves no room for manipulation or negotiation. The super empath simply withdraws their extraordinary gifts from someone who couldn't appreciate them and redirects those gifts toward people and pursuits that can provide appropriate reciprocation and respect. This elegant simplicity makes it both devastating to the avoidant and healing for the super empath.